We are back. Thanks again for returning to Hell in the Hallway podcast with your host, Billy. Today, we have an interesting topic, right? I actually had a client ask me about this just recently, and he asked me about parenting styles because I asked him, what type of parent he thought he was. And he described it to me, and I asked him a little bit about his upbringing, about his parenting. And what I found that he was raised in what's called an authoritarian parenting style. Now that's just one. We're going to go through three of them really briefly. Excuse me. We have a little time together, but there's three different types of parenting styles, right? So it's authoritative, there is permissive, and then lastly, there is authoritarian, not to be confused with the first one, authoritative, because I know how easily that can be done, right? But let's start with, which one we want to start with? Let's start with authoritative, right? So authoritative parents set high expectations for their kids. They have high standards, but they also give them guidance, and they also build relationships with their kids because they want connection as well as obedience. Now, research suggests that authoritative parents is actually the most desired and the most effective because your kids grow up being a bit more able to not just navigate the world, but also be more effective social beings and also able to manage relationships more effectively, right? Because there is a balance between obedience and relationship, and we're going to really talk about that. We talk about authoritarian parenting, right? So authoritative parents are likely to use kind of techniques and ideologies in as far as positive discipline. They're strict, they're firm, right? They're not pushovers, but they're also not strangling the life out of that child, right? So we're going to talk more about the destruction of what that looks like later. So high demand, high responsiveness, big expectations, but they foster confidence in kids, right? They have this positive relationship in the system with being self-sufficient. So that's the most effective. So let's go to one of the most least effective, which is called permissive parenting. Now, these parents, don't get me wrong. They love their kids, but they have absolutely no structure. They don't enforce anything. They see themselves as their children's friend. Have you seen parents like that? They're more like girlfriends or more like just buddies. They're not really parents, and kids actually don't desire that. On the surface, it may seem like, oh wow, this is cool. Your dad or your mom lets you do anything, but in actuality, these kids actually start to find out that this inability to have a real boundary in that relationship, that it doesn't serve them very well. See, kids actually need boundaries. It helps us grow. If you realize how a plant sometimes grow, you'll see a gardener will put a stick there and kind of help it along because it's trying to grow it up, right? That's the idea. We're growing up. But when you don't do that, we don't provide any structure, that kid is everywhere. They have no guidance. They have no understanding of how to navigate the world. And people with kids with permissive parents tend to do poorly in school. They have poor emotional boundaries, and they have expectations of others that are significantly unrealistic. Their relationships tend to be kind of destructive. Now, keep in mind, permissive parents are nurturing and love their kids. I'm not saying that because that's very different from neglectful parents. Neglectful parents have no connection whatsoever. I'm talking about parents who provide no structure at all. All right. Lastly is authoritarian parenting. Ooh, boy, I know plenty of these parents. You want to know how I know these parents? I see their kids as adults. So authoritarian parents are the parents that rule with an iron fist. They come down hard on these kids, right? And their ultimate goal is to break the will of the child. And let me say this. There is not a parent that is walking around here saying, let me break his will real quick. There's not a parent out there saying it, but a lot of times if we're not careful, we can parent people the way we were parented. We can do that. Parents that are authoritarian have low responsiveness but high expectations. What does that mean? That means there's not any nurturing involved. You're not building, you're not edifying, you're not supporting that child, right? So when there's such a high value placed over the virtue of obedience and nothing over the relationship, that kid is going to lose out. So what ends up happening, these kids end up with increased anxiety, not knowing if they can meet the expectations of anyone. They end up having increased depression. They can end up having several types of behavioral issues growing up, and also increased depression rates. So it's so important to pay attention to the type of parenting style you are engaging in. And here's what I'll tell you too. For those who don't have kids, think about how you were parented. And that doesn't mean to sit and sulk in it, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if you pay attention to that, you can see if you have any pitfalls as a result of that particular parenting style. And this is not, hey, let's blame our parents' day for my issues. This is, hey, I need wellness, I need healing. Let me see where the holes in my wellness is. Because I am just looking for you to be holistic and whole. Thanks again for tuning in to Hell in the Hallway. I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, happy reflecting.